My name is Daniel. I'm 27, and for as long as I can remember, business trips have always been nothing more than routine. Airports, conference rooms, endless presentations, and polite but shallow conversations. I never thought they could be anything else, until one particular trip changed everything. I had just landed in a small seaside town, the kind of place that doesn't usually appear on tourist brochures. The summer air was thick and heavy, clinging to my skin as I stepped out of the taxi. By the time I finished the day's meetings, I was drained, desperate for something beyond boardrooms and contracts. That evening, when the sun softened into orange and gold, I wandered toward the waterfront. The sea stretched endlessly before me, its waves rolling lazily against the pier. Families strolled along the promenade. Children ran with balloons, and musicians played soft tunes that mingled with the salty breeze. It felt alive, completely different from the sterile silence of hotel corridors. And then I saw her. She sat casually on the iron railing, balancing a cone of melting ice cream in her hand. Her dress was light, swaying gently in the breeze, and strands of her hair danced across her face. She wasn't trying to be noticed, and maybe that's what caught me off guard. She laughed softly to herself when a drop of vanilla slid down her wrist, and before I could stop myself, I spoke. "Looks like the sweetest defeat of the day," I joked. She turned, surprised, and for a moment our eyes locked. There was something in the way she looked at me, half amusement, half curiosity, as if she had been waiting for someone to interrupt her private little world. And then she smiled. We began to walk. No plan, no destination, just following the rhythm of the sea. She showed me corners of the town no guidebook would ever mention. An old bakery that smelled of fresh bread even at night, a crumbling wall covered with painted names of lovers, a hidden staircase that led straight down to the shore. Her stories flowed as naturally as the waves beside us, and I found myself laughing, listening, and forgetting entirely about work. By the time we reached the pier, the night had wrapped the town in shadows and silver light. The water glimmered below, reflecting the street lamps in trembling fragments. She stood close to me, so close I could catch the faint scent of her skin mixed with the sea air. We didn't need to speak. The silence carried more weight than words ever could. When it was finally time to part, she tilted her head, her smile playful yet soft. "You'll go for another walk tomorrow, won't you?" she asked. Her voice lingered long after she disappeared into the night, leaving me standing on the pier with a strange warmth in my chest. It was just the first evening, but something told me that this trip would be unlike any I'd ever taken. The next morning I woke earlier than I usually do on business trips. Normally, I drag myself to the hotel buffet, half awake and already dreading the day ahead. But this time, I found myself restless, almost impatient, as if something or someone was waiting for me. During the meetings, I could barely concentrate. Graphs, numbers, and carefully rehearsed phrases floated past me like background noise. My colleague spoke, I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, on the pier, on the sound of her laughter, on the way her eyes caught the light. By evening, I was standing on the promenade again, almost nervous. What if she didn't come? What if last night had been nothing more than a fleeting accident, a random crossing of paths that meant more to me than it did to her? And then, as if answering my silent doubts, she appeared. This time she wasn't sitting idly with ice cream. She was leaning against the railing, looking out at the sea, her hair pulled back by the breeze. She turned at the exact moment I spotted her, as if she had been expecting me all along. "You're late," she said with mock seriousness. "I had a meeting," I replied, grinning. "Excuses," she teased, but her smile softened the words. We walked again, our steps naturally falling into rhythm. She led me into the narrow streets, where lanterns glowed above cafes, and the smell of roasted coffee beans drifted through the night air. At one corner, a street musician was playing the accordion, and without hesitation, she spun around and grabbed my hand. "Dance with me," she said. It wasn't a request. It was a dare. At first, I laughed, awkward and stiff, but she wouldn't let go. Her eyes shone mischievously as she pulled me into the music. Around us, strangers smiled, some even clapped in rhythm. My heart raced, not from the dance itself, but from her, the fearless way she embraced the moment, the way she pulled me out of myself. When the song ended, she curtsied dramatically, and I bowed, both of us laughing like children. For a second, the entire world narrowed to just the two of us, her hand still warm in mine, her face lit by the glow of the street lamps. We continued our walk, quieter now, as if both of us were aware that something invisible was building between us. At the edge of the promenade, we stopped again, the sea murmuring softly at our feet. "Do you always do this?" I asked. "Do what?" She tilted her head. "Turn strangers into not strangers." She thought for a moment, her smile fading into something gentler. "Only when it feels right," she said. Her words sank deep into me, and I realized that this wasn't just a casual encounter. There was something rare here, something fragile, and I didn't want to let it slip away. When we finally parted again, the night was cooler, the streets quieter, but her presence stayed with me, vivid and alive, making sleep impossible. I knew, with complete certainty, that tomorrow I'd be waiting again. The third day of my trip began just like the others: suit, tie, polite smiles, and hotel conference rooms. But unlike the others, I felt strangely detached from everything around me. My colleagues discussed contracts and strategies, but my mind was elsewhere, already on the promenade, already on her. During lunch, I caught myself doodling on the corner of my notepad. Waves, a railing, the curve of a smile. Ridiculous, I thought, shaking my head. I'd known her for less than 48 hours, yet she was already woven into my thoughts like someone I'd carried for years. That evening, I didn't bother pretending it was coincidence. I went straight to the pier, my steps quick, almost eager. And she was there, this time sitting cross-legged on the wooden planks, dangling a small notebook from her fingers. "You look serious," I said, lowering myself beside her. "I was writing," she replied without looking up. "Writing what?" She hesitated, then closed the notebook gently. "Stories," she admitted. "About people. About moments. Sometimes about myself." There was something vulnerable in the way she said it, as if showing me a piece of herself she didn't share with just anyone. "Can I read one?" I asked. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Not yet. Maybe someday." The tide rolled beneath us, the smell of salt filling the air. We talked for hours about books, about music, about places we both wanted to see. She told me she had lived in this town her whole life, but never grew tired of it. I told her about the constant traveling my job demanded, how most places blurred together into the same sterile hotels and airports. "Maybe that's why you needed this," she said thoughtfully. "Needed what?" "This place. This moment. Me." The words lingered in the air. She didn't say them arrogantly, more like a simple truth spoken aloud. And for a second, I had no response. She was right. Later, as we walked back through the quiet streets, she suddenly stopped. "Close your eyes," she said. I hesitated but did as she asked. She guided me a few steps, her hand light on my arm. Then she whispered, "Open." Before me was a hidden garden, tucked between two crumbling stone walls. Lanterns hung from branches, glowing golden, and vines curled along the path like something out of a dream. The air was filled with the scent of jasmine. "Not many people know this place," she said softly. "But it feels like magic, doesn't it?" And it did. The kind of magic you stumble upon once in a lifetime. We stood there, the night thick with unspoken things. I wanted to reach for her hand, to close the small distance between us, but I didn't. Not yet. Something told me the waiting, the slow unfolding, was part of the spell. When we parted that night, I lay awake in my hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. I knew this wasn't just a passing encounter anymore. Something real was forming, fragile and undeniable. And for the first time in years, I didn't care about the meetings waiting for me in the morning. I only cared about tomorrow evening. On the fourth day, the town felt different. The air was heavier, as though something in the sky was waiting to break. My meetings passed in a blur, my thoughts already chasing the evening. When I finally reached the promenade, the sea was restless, its waves sharper, its voice louder. She stood there again, barefoot this time, her sandals dangling from her hand. "You're early," I said, surprised. "So are you," she replied with a knowing smile. We began to walk, the familiar path beneath our feet. But there was something in her silence that night, something thoughtful, almost fragile. "Are you all right?" I asked. She hesitated. "I was just thinking how strange it is. 2 days ago, you were a stranger. And now," her voice trailed off, lost in the wind. "And now," I pressed gently. She looked at me then, her eyes searching mine. "Now I feel like I've known you forever." The words hit me with quiet force. I didn't know what to say, so instead, I let silence speak for me. We walked closer, our shoulders brushing, until suddenly the first raindrop fell. It started as a drizzle, then quickly grew into a storm. The streets emptied as people ran for cover, but she laughed, tilting her face toward the sky. "Come on," she shouted, grabbing my hand. We ran through the rain, our clothes clinging to us, the cobblestones slick beneath our feet. She led me through winding alleys until we ducked beneath an archway, both of us breathless, dripping, laughing. Her hair stuck to her face, her dress clung to her skin, and in that moment, she had never looked more alive. The laughter between us faded slowly, replaced by something heavier, something electric. For a second, I thought she might kiss me, or maybe I would kiss her. The space between us narrowed, until even the rain seemed to hold its breath. But instead, she whispered, "You should go back to your hotel. You'll catch a cold." Her words broke the spell, but not entirely. I nodded, though every part of me wanted to stay. That night, lying in bed, the storm outside mirrored the storm inside me. I replayed her words, her laughter, the way her hand had fit so naturally into mine. It was undeniable now. This was no passing encounter. Something was building, pulling us closer, whether we were ready for it or not. The morning after the storm, the town smelled of salt and wet stone. My colleagues complained about canceled flights and rescheduled meetings, but my mind wasn't on work. It hadn't been for days. By evening, the sky had cleared, painted in soft hues of lavender and gold. I found her waiting for me on the pier, leaning against the railing as though it belonged to her. When she saw me, her face lit up, not in surprise, but in recognition, as though my arrival was inevitable. "You survived the storm?" she teased. "Barely," I said. "I almost drowned in paperwork today." She laughed, shaking her head. "Come, I want to show you something." We walked through the quieter part of town until we reached an old courtyard. It was empty, except for a cluster of paper lanterns strung above us, swaying gently in the breeze. Their glow was warm, golden, almost unreal. She sat on a low stone wall and patted the space beside her. When I was little, my grandmother used to bring me here. She told me that if you made a wish under these lanterns, the sea would carry it away and bring it back to you when the time was right. And did it ever work? I asked. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "I'm still waiting." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with possibility, with the weight of everything unsaid. The lantern light caught in her eyes, and I realized I was holding my breath. Slowly, almost without meaning to, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Her fingers curled into mine, soft and certain. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even a confession. But in that simple touch, something shifted. The unspoken became undeniable. "I don't want this to end," I admitted quietly. She squeezed my hand gently. "Then don't let it." The words were simple, but they echoed in me long after. Because I knew, no matter how brief this trip was supposed to be, what was happening between us was not something I could leave behind like another city on a business itinerary. When we parted that night, the lanterns still swayed above us, glowing against the dark sky. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor passing through. I felt like I belonged. The following day felt endless. Every minute in the meeting room was a battle against my own impatience. My mind wasn't on contracts or figures. It was with her, replaying the way her hand had rested in mine under the lantern light. By the time evening came, I was already on the promenade, scanning the crowd. And then I saw her, standing at the very edge of the pier, gazing out at the horizon where the sun was sinking into the sea. She turned as I approached, and her smile was softer this time, quieter, like it belonged only to me. "You're early," she said. "So are you," I replied. We didn't need many words. We walked slowly, side by side, until the town lights flickered behind us, and only the sound of the waves remained. She told me about her favorite season, the autumn, when the sea grew wild and the town emptied of tourists. I told her about my childhood in a city far from the ocean, where the only waves I knew were on a TV screen. When we reached the end of the pier, she leaned against the railing, her hair catching the breeze. I stood beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder brushing mine. For a while, we just listened to the sea. Then she said softly, almost to herself, "It feels like the world disappears here." "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I answered. She turned her head, and suddenly her face was so close to mine that I could see every detail. The curve of her lips, the flicker of lantern light in her eyes. The silence between us tightened, heavy, electric. And then, without planning it, without even thinking, I leaned in. Our lips met, hesitant at first, as though testing the fragile space we had built between us. Then, slowly, it deepened, sure and undeniable. The world did disappear, just as she'd said. There was only the salt of the sea, the warmth of her, and the dizzying realization that I didn't want to be anywhere else. When we finally pulled apart, she kept her forehead against mine, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll leave soon," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I admitted. The truth hurt more than I expected. She closed her eyes for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Then let's not waste the time we have." And just like that, the fragility of it all became clear. This wasn't forever. But maybe it didn't need to be. Maybe forever could exist in the space of a few stolen days. That night, as I walked back to my hotel, my lips still tingling with the memory of her kiss, I realized my trip had changed completely. I had come here for business, but I had found something far more dangerous, something I couldn't put on a schedule, something that would stay with me long after I boarded the plane home. The next 2 days blurred into something dreamlike. My mornings were filled with stiff meetings, endless presentations, and polite handshakes, but every evening belonged to her. And those evenings became the only hours that mattered. We wandered through streets I would never have found alone, sitting on stone steps with cups of strong coffee, listening to street musicians until the night grew quiet. She told me stories of her childhood, the tree she used to climb that was now cut down, the teacher who convinced her to write, the friend who once promised to run away with her, but never did. I listened, memorizing every word as though it might one day be all I had left of her. One evening, we returned to the hidden garden of lanterns. She lay back on the grass, her dress spread out like a ripple of light, and I lay beside her. The stars shimmered faintly above, but I could barely look at them. Her presence outshone everything. "Do you ever think," she asked suddenly, "that some people only cross paths for a short while, but still change you forever?" Her voice was soft, thoughtful, but I felt the weight of the question settle deep inside me. "Yes," I said. "I think about it every night now." She turned her head toward me, and in the glow of the lanterns, her smile was tinged with sadness. "You're leaving soon," she whispered. The truth hung between us, undeniable. My flight back was already scheduled, my calendar already filling with the next city, the next meeting. And yet, lying there beside her, the idea of leaving felt unbearable. I reached for her hand, my thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Then let's make every moment count," I said. She didn't answer, but the way she tightened her grip told me she felt the same. That night, as we walked back to the pier, the sea was calm again, its waves whispering softly against the shore. We stopped under the street lamps, their glow painting her hair with silver. This time, when we kissed, it wasn't hesitant or unsure. It was certain, deep, a promise carved into the night air. But even as I held her, I felt the cruel ticking of time behind us, like sand slipping through an hourglass we couldn't stop. The day of my departure crept up like a shadow I'd been pretending not to see. My suitcase sat half-packed in the corner of the hotel room, a silent reminder of reality. But that evening, I left it untouched. There was only one place I wanted to be. She was already waiting for me on the pier, her figure outlined by the soft glow of the lamps. For a moment, I simply stood there, watching her try to burn every detail into memory. The curve of her posture, the way the breeze tangled her hair, the quiet patience in her eyes. "You're late," she teased when I finally approached. "I wanted to make it dramatic," I said, forcing a smile. We both knew what this night meant. There was no need to say it. Instead, we walked as we always had, slowly letting the rhythm of the sea guide us. But our laughter was softer, our silences longer. Every glance lingered just a little more, every touch felt heavier. At one point, she led me back to the hidden garden of lanterns. They swayed gently above us, glowing against the dark sky as though they knew this was their final performance. "Make a wish," she whispered. I closed my eyes, but I didn't need to think. Let this moment never end. When I opened them again, she was watching me, her face illuminated in golden light. I wanted to tell her everything, that I didn't want to leave, that I didn't know how I'd return to my life after this, that meeting her had shifted something inside me I couldn't undo. But the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I kissed her. It was different this time, hungry, desperate, as though we could fight time itself if only we held on tightly enough. She clung to me, her hands trembling slightly against my skin, and in that kiss, all the unsaid things screamed louder than words ever could. Later, we sat together on the grass, her head resting on my shoulder. The lanterns above blurred into halos of light, and I wished the night could stretch into eternity. But eventually, she whispered the words I had been dreading. "You have to go." I closed my eyes, holding her tighter, as if I could stop the world from moving. But the truth pressed down on us both. Morning was coming. And with it, goodbye. The sky was only beginning to pale when I left my hotel, suitcase rolling quietly behind me across the cobblestones. The town was still asleep, shutters closed, streets empty, only the faint hush of the tide breaking the silence. And yet, she was there, waiting. She stood near the taxi stand, her arms crossed lightly, as if bracing herself against the cool morning air. When she saw me, her smile was small, fragile, like glass that might shatter if touched. "I didn't think you'd come," I said softly. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "Goodbyes are my favorite." The driver loaded my suitcase, but neither of us moved toward the car. We stood there, suspended in the strange stillness of dawn, knowing that every second was a second less. "I don't want this to end," I said finally, the words spilling out like a confession. She looked at me with eyes that carried both warmth and sadness. "It doesn't have to end. Not here. Not really. But we live in different worlds," I whispered. "Then maybe our worlds just touch for a while," she replied. "And maybe that's enough." Her voice wavered slightly, but her gaze didn't. She was braver than I was. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tighter than I thought possible, memorizing the scent of her hair, the warmth of her body against mine. It was a kiss and a goodbye wrapped into one, sweet, aching, desperate. When we finally let go, I climbed into the taxi. The driver started the engine, and the car began to pull away. Through the window, I saw her, standing there in the pale morning light, her figure growing smaller with every turn of the wheels. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. The image of her would never leave me. As the town disappeared behind me, I realized the truth. Some places you leave, but they never leave you. And some people, you meet once, but they stay forever. The hum of the plane was steady, almost hypnotic, but I couldn't close my eyes. Outside the window, the clouds stretched endlessly, soft and indifferent. Below them, the town I had just left was already nothing more than a dot on the map. And yet, it felt closer than anything else in my life. I thought about her, about the first time I saw her with that ice cream cone, the way she laughed at herself, the way the wind played with her hair. I thought about our walks, the hidden garden of lanterns, the storm that forced us into shelter, the kisses that had felt like stolen time. Each moment was vivid, alive, burning brighter than years of meetings and hotel rooms ever could. And now, she was behind me. Or maybe not. Maybe she was carried with me, tucked into every thought, every silence. Weeks later, back in my routine of offices and emails, I would still find myself drifting. A song on the radio would remind me of her laughter. The scent of jasmine in a stranger's perfume would send me back to that hidden garden. Even the sea, when I glimpsed it again on another trip, no longer felt like just water and waves. It felt like her. I didn't know if I would ever return to that town. I didn't know if our paths would ever cross again. But in some strange, undeniable way, it didn't matter. Because what we had wasn't lost. It was carved into me, part of who I had become. Sometimes at night, when the world grew quiet, I'd hear her voice in memory. "You'll go for another walk tomorrow, won't you?" And even though tomorrow never came, the echo of her words stayed with me. Like the sea itself, endless and eternal.